Here we go. Live on the hotline. I have Megan Glowiak, if I'm saying that right.
You got it close. It's glowy.
Yeah, I figured I had a 50-50 chance there.
Right on. Good deal,
This
sir.
this is episode 3, The Good Samaritan, and which I was surprised when you picked that because I almost like forgot about this episode. I was like, I expect everybody wants to do like the super famous episodes right out the gate. But this is more interesting actually. But the first thing I wrote down is Jerry has a car phone in 1992, which is funny.
Yes. Yes. I don't know, those are like rare. Like my dad actually worked for a communications company in the 80s, and he was one of the first people to have mobile phones in his car and everything like that. So seeing it in this episode was definitely a little nostalgic. And then I have here about how he's talking to Elaine, and he's getting mad because he's like trying to let someone in front of him, and they get in front of him, and of course they'll give him the wave. That's a pet peeve of mine as well. But I'd love to give me that wave. He was really adamant about that.
I didn't write that down, but as that was happening, I'm like, this is why this show is popular because this is still relevant today. Like people still have these conversations like, oh, this guy wants to get in front of me. Okay, I'll let him get in front of me. Like this is so common still.
Right, exactly. And it's like that's one thing that hasn't changed. And then speaking of courtesies or discourtesies, then he proceeds to watch somebody hit and run a vehicle in front of him, and then of course he goes to follow and meets up with a beautiful woman named Angela, and he just doesn't want to confront her about it, and just says, oh, your tire's a little low back there, and talked himself into a date.
He happens to follow this person. It happens to be a woman. They happen to want to go out with him, and then he thinks it's all happening again with the next woman too. He's like, "Oh well, I'll flip it over to Becky, and she'll go out with me too." Like every woman he just meets on the street will always go out with him, no matter what. There's like a that's not just a this episode. That obviously is like a recurring Seinfeld thing, but
Yeah, and I've got here about how they're back at the apartment, and then he's talking to George about what happened, and then Elaine came in and asked because I just told him exactly that don't tell Elaine what's going on. And then Elaine comes in, and then oh my god, the story that follows it just uh, what a far fetched story, like seriously. And then the shoving, God, George.
this is very reminiscent of also from season 3, the parking space when they force Elaine on the spot to make up the story. The gang of wild teenagers was followed. It's like the same kind of story almost, where he's like, I followed this guy who's a troublemaker, and we almost got, and it's all fake or whatever. Like same thing almost.
Like, there's a lot of comparisons to that, and then the part that comes up after this is like my favorite part of the entire episode. When Kramer comes into the apartment, he's got a band-aid on his head, and Elaine asks him what's going on. He says, oh yeah, I banged my head on the coffee table watching Entertainment Tonight the other night. You don't think anything of it, of course. And then we transition over to the dinner. The two big things, of course, the takeaways from that were the Eduardo Carocchio Matador story, and then the whole sneezing debacle, which turned into something else, which we'll get on later about that. But that's like the big thing I can think of from that. And then I guess Angela and Jerry go on their date in the middle of this, and they're just having ice cream in the car, and he's talking about, who's courteous, who leaves a note and all that stuff. So he's kept, being subliminal about it, but she just it went over her head, and they were making out, eating ice cream, whatever. But
Rewinding for a quick second, and they
sure.
in the main apartment scene, we get Jerry does his famous, which I forgot that this was from this episode. He goes, "Oh, right, 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 right." He does.
Yes.
I was like, "That's from this
Yes.
episode." And then we get like parallel back and forth where George says, "I'm speechless. I have no speech," and then a minute later, Elaine says, "I'm speechless. I am without speech." I was like, "Oh man, that is." That is some tight
Yes,
little conversation bits there. This is juicy stuff.
yes. I do have that noted as well about the I have no speech, I'm speechless. It was just a little side note off to there, but yeah, definitely a lot of different, play on play on words, I guess. But yeah, I really yeah, that was the right, and then the other one coming up, uno momento, por favor,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
later
my
on.
favorite one.
Let's hold that on
Yes,
for later. I want to get back to
yes,
that.
I am. When they go back to the apartment and they're talking about the sneeze, like, the rules of the sneeze, the spouse gets the right of first refusal, all of those crazy rules. And then Elaine comes in and they're talking about, instead of saying, God bless you, say, oh, you're so good looking. And then she tells George, hey, just to let you know, Robin wants you to give her a call from the other night. And so he goes and makes that phone call, and I'll let you lead into what happens after that. This is probably my favorite part, but I will let you discuss it if you would like. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
I didn't even write any notes for that, but I did write
Mhm.
George saying God bless you first, and then he makes that little remark. I said that's all you need for like a storyline to just like start building off of. You don't need like it's the show's good when it's something super simple. So just him making a little remark, and then you can take that into like exciting different places. But
Well, what happens when he goes to call Robin? Kramer comes in and he's putting
oh yeah,
something
yeah,
on the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
bookshelf, and Entertainment Tonight starts going, and he starts a heaving and a hoeing, and I wonder how many takes that took, because you could see Jerry and Julia there, like, you know they're trying to be as serious as possible while this is all going on, and then that's when they discover that he has that aversion to Mary Hart's voice, and the sound of her voice makes him convulse uncontrollably. And oh my god, the first time I saw that scene, I like, oh my goodness, I
The blocking is so yeah, Kramer is behind them so that he can do all this and they don't even see it or whatever, right? So we can get that contrast where they're just looking at the TV and right behind them he's going wild and they don't even notice and until he's like so far into it.
they probably really didn't see him, and then but it's just how he just does that, and just all the movements he makes, and it's just like and then George didn't even know this was going on because he was too busy talking to Robin, and she wants to meet up for a little extra marital affair. So apparently Robin forgot to tell Elaine that she was using her as an excuse. Robin's husband Michael calls Elaine asking where she's at, and he gets really mad. And one of my favorite things that he has to say is, I'm gonna sew his ass to his face.
He has like a run of things he's threatening to do and it must have been
Yes.
deliberate. I didn't notice. So I was like, oh, and then you also have Angela doing the same thing to Jerry, where she's threatening. I didn't write down any of his stuff, but I wrote down
No.
Angela says, which is like way scarier than I remember. She says, I'll bash your skull into Vegematic like a cabbage. Yeah, she says a few other things. That's the only one I wrote down. I'm like, wow, she's threatening to bash his skull open. That's as bad as it gets.
Right. And then I think the cherry on top was Elaine busting through the door and saying, don't you ever tell anybody about me hitting that car. And then she calls him out on his crap. So
Sorry, I was
we
gonna say there's like a double reveal where Elaine is like, "Oh, I caught you in the act. You were lying about the whole story," and then it switches around again right away where Jerry is like, "I caught you in the act. You made up your whole story too." So they're both guilty of making up these stories, the Eduardo story, and then the I chased this guy down who hit the car. So it's nice, pretty good symmetry right there.
Right, and with George coming in, because he didn't know, he was oblivious to what happened, and so Elaine's like telling him about what Michael said, and so they start to fight, and then that's when the whole Matador story comes out, where it's
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
uno momento, por favor. No, you're good. But it's like It's just hilarious how he just calls her out on it. It's kind of turnabout as fair play on that. So, but I do like you said the symmetry is very nice on the flipping around of everything. It's like the whole karma, what goes around comes around.
Yeah,
And then is
I wrote down Jerry miming the bullfighter move with the towel. That got a laugh out of me because he doesn't just say it. He takes a little hand towel and does a little bullfighter move when he says
yes,
Eduardo Carocchio.
I love that part. It's hilarious. And he
Yeah,
just has
I
to be that
definitely.
little bit extra. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that part. The very last part of the episode is where Kramer shows up at Becky's apartment. She opens the door and guess what's on TV?
Yeah.
And oh, I wonder how many takes that took too, because I mean, he had stuff in his hair, and he that was flipping and flying, and you could see, like, you could tell it was getting in her face too. But that, I mean, there's a lot in this episode for sure, and it's just there's just a lot of different little things about it. Even though it's not a major episode, it is my favorite episode.
Your
So
favorite,
taking
really?
a yeah, it has to be my favorite one because of the whole
Wow.
Kramer convulsing thing and whatnot. There's just a lot of storylines in here that they kind of tend to wrap things up nice and neat because you notice on some episodes like they'll have girlfriends through like girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever through multiple episodes, but this one just kind of packaged it up and got it all done and out of the way. No dragging on of sorts.
The very last thing I wrote down was Kramer. I got shocked when I saw this when they cut to that scene. Kramer's hair all slicked back for his date with Becky. I was like, oh man, you never see him with his hair slicked back like that. I mean, we see him go on dates. He doesn't like slick his hair back for his dates normally. That not that I'm aware of. Because I was really thrown when I saw that. I like paused the TV.
Mm-hmm. Oh
Um,
yes, and it's like there's a reason for that.
yeah, so that way when he can flop it out or whatever. Yeah.
His hair, it's more of a dramatic effect because if it was just his dry hair, it wouldn't have had the same effect as if his hair was wet. So I'm really glad they went with that. It really wrapped that up nice and neat. It really made that scene.
Is there any final things we didn't mention that instead of rewinding before, I should have just saved it for here? Like at the end, we'll go back. Anything we missed along the way? Any last thoughts? Anything we didn't get to?
The only thing I want to mention is the incoming stand-up bit talking about the methods of communication, and this is like other shows in the '90s, predicting the future. He's talking about you got something so important, and you got to talk to somebody right now, and talking about you got to give everybody a chance to miss you a little, and it's like. Nowadays, with the way communication is, I mean, he's got all these different ways, and he's rattling off all these ways of communicating even back in the 90s you had that stuff. And now that we're in this technology age, it was really appropriate, I think, for him to point that out in his routine and to just see years later that that's really how the world is now. I think that's
Um,
all I got to add to this.
my only thing I did want to mention. This is gonna seem really strange. I'm gonna try to put a picture of it with the video. There's a in that first main scene where everybody's sort of in the apartment. They're eating cookies,
Mm-hmm.
and you see Jerry's drinking a glass of milk. The cookie box is laying down sideways, and the cookies are just sort of like spilled out onto his counter. It's like the
Oh,
strangest
wow.
thing. Yeah, like they're eating cookies by like just turning the box sideways, letting them kind of just fall all over the place, and then like picking them. There's got to be a reason where like they couldn't show the box or whatever due to some kind of like sponsorship or copyright or something. Even though you can see his cereal in the back most of the time, and that's not it. Maybe this is season three. They hadn't figured that out, or they hadn't gotten clearance or something. Like you're not allowed to say Snapple sometimes unless you get the okay or like shit like that. I think goes on in
Right.
TV. Um, so that's my only theory on
Yes.
the cookies, or maybe it fell over and nobody gave a damn and they didn't notice and they just kept rolling. I don't know. But
Yeah, because
I'm
like
gonna throw that
it seems
screenshot
like
up.
out of character. Yes, indeed. Yeah, try to find. I got Cookie Box wrote down too. If you can find it, I mean, I know you'll find it. You're like Mister
I'll
Admin
find it.
expert
It's
stuff.
yeah.
So
I'll find the screen. I'm gonna find the screenshot and put it up. That kind of bugged me, and I was like, "That's weird." And uh, I got that's those are all my notes. I have nothing else to say. Good episode. I didn't really have a fond memory of it. Like in my head, I was like, I feel like this is kind of one of those middle of the road episodes. And after it was
hmm
over, I was like, I liked it quite a bit. So yeah,
good.
I was like almost pleasantly surprised. Some of the episodes from the early episodes, I feel like I haven't seen in a couple years, so it's cool to see them again. Feels fresh a little bit.
Right on. Well, I'm glad that I could come on here with you and talk about my favorite episode. My favorite, not as popular as most episodes, but I do like that you got to revisit and realize how much you really liked it. So that's awesome.
Yeah.